This episode, Suzanne McDermott joins us to discuss the Roswell incident and the 3 dreams of J. Robert Oppenheimer. The Roswell incident refers to the mysterious events that occurred in Roswell, New Mexico in 1947, involving the alleged crash of an unidentified flying object.
My father was a rancher east of Socorro, southeast of Corona, near Roswell, New Mexico. In the middle of nowhere, no radio, no telephone. 1947, and I was 12 years old. Big lightning storm one night, beginning of July. We heard an explosion, wondered what, wondered why. Riding out the next morning, over the pasture to check on some sheep. That's when Daddy found it, a big field of weird debris. He brought some of it home and laid it out on the kitchen floor. Bits and pieces of things we'd never seen before. Like foil but not foil, like wood but not wood, like wire, waxed paper, all weighing much less than it should. And everything was so strong, we couldn't cut it or scrape it. Pliable, unnatural, we couldn't burn or break it. And there were symbols in purple and...
J. Robert Oppenheimer was a brilliant American physicist and the scientific director of the Manhattan Project, which led to the development of the atomic bomb during World War II.
Wise man following a star in a big gray Cadillac, drove across the desert, traced his future in his track, on to California, to the scientific minds, to the duties of his nation and the fate of all mankind. I've dreamed that I saw 3 men standing in front of me. One held a box of elements, one held a golden key, one held the holy sonnets, and from them he read to me. But I am betrothed unto your enemy.
We know now that in the early years of the 20th century, this world was being watched closely by intelligences greater than man's.
Did the CIA write Wind of Change by the Scorpions?
As humans busied themselves about the various concerns, they were scrutinized and studied.
Dr. Loeb, what percentage chance do you give it that you have indeed uncovered extraterrestrial or non-human technology?
With infinite complacence, people went about their affairs, yet across an immense ethereal gulf, intellects vast and unsympathetic drew their plans against us.
Prior to your abduction, did you believe in UFOs or any sort of alien life form?
All things unexplained.
So some of that, I think, sir, we'll save for closed session.
All right, this is Dr. Mouse. You have found all things unexplained. We're back tonight. By the way, we really appreciate all of you. We've been tearing it up this summer on the Apple Podcast charts. You know, it takes a lot to make a podcast happen. So if you get a chance, make sure to, wherever you're listening or watching, hit that subscribe button, hit the follow button. Make sure to share, make sure to like, make sure to comment. It helps us defeat the algorithms.
Wonderful. Welcome, all you unexplained ones out there. We are so thankful to have each of you with us, either here live tonight or joining us on our podcast. For those that are joining us live, we do have a comment section. We would love to get your comments and questions. If you have a question for our guest, we ask that you put it in all caps so that we can address it. And we are so fortunate. We have a very lovely and talented guest joining us on our show. And I assure you that's not something we say about most of the guests joining us on our show. Teasing.
So
I'm only
true.
kidding. We've had many lovely guests on our show, but I have had the privilege of delving into her past over the past few days and reading her blog and listening to her music and learning all about her travels and her successes. And I assure you that you will all want to know our guest so much more after this. So we have Suzanne McDermott joining us. She's worked as an artist, a writer, a musician, an administrator, a producer, a teacher. Her songs are critically acclaimed. She's got lots of albums out there, and she is joining us tonight because of a unique connection that we have, something that is now so prevalent in society. The songs that she have written, one about the Roswell incident and another one about Robert J. Oppenheimer, both so prevalent in our culture currently. So Suzanne, thank you so much for joining us on our show.
Very glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. And we are experiencing a few technical difficulties with an echo, but we are all pros here. Suzanne has performed live all over the place. We're going to work through it. I think that we will be just fine. So the first thing that we really wanted to dive into was this journey into your music and your storytelling. And boy, are you a fantastic storyteller. I have been reading your blogs endlessly, and I rarely get to sit down and read, which is unfortunate because that's one of my absolute favorite pastimes. And I couldn't pull myself away. I started with your 5 blogs that you did about your song about Roswell, and then I went into your Oppenheimer, and then I just kept going because they're all so philosophical and deeply rooted in the human connection and who we are and those around us. But I did want to know a little bit about how you came to write the Roswell incident.
Well, you probably know this if you've actually read those blogs. I was in Kerrville, Texas in 1996, I guess, at the folk festival there. And I ran into a guy who was putting up his tent, and we got to chatting, and it turned out he lived right next to Area 51. And I said, "What? Area 51? That sounds familiar." And so from there, I was reminded of Roswell, and I thought, oh my God, that's just a perfect subject for a Dust Bowl ballad type treatment, you know? And so when I got home, I started working on it. And it's, as you know, it is such a complex subject with so many different ways in and so many rabbit holes to go down. And, you know, before I got ready for this podcast, I found this book. Oh, wait, but first, so I'm in Kerrville, and I go to a used bookstore or something with some friends, and I found this book. I don't know if this is reversed or not on the screen, but it's The Secret of the Saucers by Orfeo Angelucci. And it's a 1955 book on an encounter with a flying saucer. And it's very spiritual. So I thought, well, that's a sign. So I got home, and I was having trouble framing the story. And then I found this book. Again, I don't know if you can see that or not, but it's The Roswell Incident, the classic study of UFO contact. And when I opened this tonight, I just saw that I'd marked the pages. I'd folded down the pages of the passages that helped me tell the story. So I framed the story through the eyes of, I made it one narrator, but the 2 children who were involved in the incident, the son of the rancher the daughter of the rancher who found the debris and the son of the military officer who came to clean it up originally. So I didn't quote them exactly, but I used their experiences to tell the story.
So what's wild to me, and this song is it's beautiful. All of your songs are really beautiful. They're the kind of songs that you can just sit and listen to and actually sort of contemplate your life and what you've known to exist. But the song is so lovely. As you said, you had used these two children's versions of the story essentially to write your song. But what is amazing to me is how this song led you to meet the boy, who now, of course, is a man when you meet him in person, but all of the other people along the way that were connected to the incident, or how your song got taken to so many different places. Is that something that you ever thought might happen, that you'd get so connected to Roswell through this one song?
Never in a million years. I really didn't. However, I did have a college friend who encouraged me strongly to make an EP and to send it to Roswell. I forget how it all, came about, but I was invited by the mayor of Roswell to perform for the 50th anniversary. And it was like a small town summer fair, the 50th anniversary. And there were more press people than there were attendees. And but anyway, I performed right next to Whitley Strieber giving a talk, and what I mostly remember about him is that he had a pet parrot or some kind of pet bird on his shoulder throughout the entire event. But anyway, yeah, so I became friends with the mayor of Roswell, but it was a very small group of people, and I met Jesse Marcel Jr., who was a medical doctor, and he's the son that I quoted in the song. And he invited me up to his hotel room where his wife and a couple of his kids were, already turned in for the night. And I played the song for them. And it was very dark, but it was really, it was a beautiful experience. Yeah. That's
so wonderful. And to read your blog about that experience for you, it just seemed like everything kept happening. You were, next thing you know, you're in the car with the mayor and he's driving you home from one of your performances and you're getting invited up to sing the song. And it just reminds you how much the UFO community used to be quite small. The people that were all involved in the Roswell incident was very, very small. And now that community is growing and growing, and everybody's talking about it everywhere you go. Every news outlet has been covering these congressional hearings and what have you. Have you found that your song has picked up steam again, that people are playing it more or finding it more naturally, or has it sort of stayed streamlined from when you first released it?
Well, first of all, when I first released it, there was no streaming and there was no, it was all, at that point, CDs mostly, and folk DJs. And however, a few years ago, a YouTuber used the song behind one of his shows. And so because he was popular, this song, became, more people listened to the song. And it's definitely the song that's been listened to more, as far as I can tell, than any other of my songs, even though I've got some great other songs, if I say so myself. But anyway, so that happened. And then, every once in a while I would get into contact with someone about the song, because I was sort of following what was going on. And so.
Thanks, Suzanne. So I have to ask you, I noticed on your blog that, you hear a lot of stories from old timers that were maybe maybe not a part of the Roswell incident. Can you share maybe one or two of your favorites that you heard from folks?
Well, I'll tell you, one was, I mean, I'll just say this. When I first wrote that song and I first performed that song, I was playing at a little club in the middle of Massachusetts, a little folk club opening for someone. And I thought, okay, I'm about to perform a 6+ minute song, and it's about a flying saucer crash. And so, but what I discovered was that people, thought I was singing about my father and that I was the 12-year-old, and I had to tell them that I wasn't that old. And then also I had, people coming up insisting that it was a weather balloon. But one interesting experience was that an older man came up and said that he'd been in the Air Force flying from some base in Southern California, I think, they were supposed to land at the base that is no longer there. It was called something different at the time, I forget. But anyway, and they were diverted. They were not permitted to land, and they had to go, change their flight path. So that was one.
To me, that's case closed. That sort of evidence, they didn't divert for a weather balloon. I can promise you that. But Suzanne, one of the lines from your song that I just loved, the Roswell incident, the verse says, "They said we know what we saw, no rocket, no weather balloon. Why keep it a secret? What could we learn? What could we learn? Well, we don't know, but we do know two things. We know what we saw, and we know that we are not alone." And that is really profound, I think. Did you ever find yourself picking up on the X-Files or any of this other UFO culture?
The X-Files was a little after my time. And I didn't watch much TV as an adult, but as a kid I did. And so, it didn't really start with the X-Files. So when I was growing up, I lived for the Twilight Zone and for the Outer Limits, the original Outer Limits. I couldn't wait for them to come on. And also the culture was just saturated with it. I guess if you were looking for it, but like Roy Thinnis in Quinn Martin production of, it was about aliens, and he was an FBI agent, I think. And you could tell aliens because they had a deformed little finger. And like the camera would zoom in on the little finger. So anyway, it was just around, and it was really interesting and fascinating. But I don't have to talk about this right now, but tell me if you want me to. But I was just rereading this afternoon, in 1955. Right. So these two books I have, these are both 1955. Inside the Spaceships and The Secret of the Saucers. And I was just reading Carl Jung. It's a little tiny book, 165 pages or something, called Flying Saucers, A Modern Myth of Things Seen in the Sky. And you can get a PDF of it online and just read it. It's really, really interesting.
Yes, so I would love if we could play part of your song, if you're okay with it. I think when people hear there's a song about Roswell, they might not fully understand how beautiful the song truly is. So if you're okay with it, I would love to play some for our audience.
Yes, here we go. This is Suzanne McDermott and the Roswell incident.
My father was a rancher east of Socorro. southeast of Corona near Roswell, New Mexico. In the middle of nowhere, no radio, no telephone. 1947, and I was 12 years old. Big lightning storm one night, beginning of July. We heard an explosion, wondered why. Riding out the next morning, over the pasture to check on some sheep. That's when Daddy found it, the big field of weird debris. He brought some of it home and laid it out on the kitchen floor. Bits and pieces of things we'd never seen before.
So lovely. It's seriously, you have a gift for storytelling, number one. And number two, it's so beautiful. I mean, I'm guessing that you just grew up having a natural affinity for music and for storytelling, and you have been able to run with that your whole life. And I would love for you to delve into that, but also to let our listeners know where they can hear the full song and your other songs as well.
Well, you can hear all of my songs through all of the streaming apps or agencies or whatever they are, but you can go to my website, SuzanneMcDermott.com, and there are links to all of those, Spotify, YouTube, whatever. So go to my website and you can find everything you would ever want to know and more.
So I have to tell Suzanne this. I don't think ever even reveal why we first emailed her, but Suzanne, I was making a post. It's not unusual for us to make posts about UFOs on Instagram, right? And so I'm always searching for, some background music to add to the post to make them interesting. And one day I just typed in the word Roswell, and I wasn't expecting it, but the Roswell incident popped up, and I said, wow, I have to listen to this. And so that became the background music to one of our Instagram posts.
They said, oh, cool.
While I'm listening to the song, it just, to me, like a great country song or a great folk song, I see it in my head and it just totally encapsulates what I feel like I already know that Roswell was. Does that make sense? Like, it really starts playing this scene in my mind, and I'm like, yeah, I think that really is what happened out there. Do you have people tell you that really resonates with them on this like deep, true level?
Well, yes. I mean, as I said, people think I'm actually telling a story about myself and my father, and that's a high compliment. None of this, I did not expect any of this. But also, I was thinking when I was getting ready for this, obviously something happened there. I mean, I don't have any firsthand experience. And what really convinces me that it was extremely unusual is that the interviews, which you may still be able to find some, but the interviews with the regular people who lived in Roswell and were there. So yeah, Becky Braswell, I can't remember right now, but and Jesse Marcel Jr., but also they weren't these people, but like the postman or the electrical engineer who lived in town or the guy that ran the post office. There are interviews with a whole bunch of people when they were elderly, and they talk about it because at that time in the late 40s, you could not talk about anything to do with the military, post-war. It was very, very secretive, especially, in New Mexico, where Los Alamos was. And loose lips sink ships. That's it.
Yeah, that's for sure. They do. And as you mentioned, everybody was told. I can't remember if you must have written this and I was reading it, that they could not say anything. They were not allowed to say a word. that those who did talk were taken away and pretty much told that it was their duty, or threatened that if they spoke that they would lose everything. So this song definitely gives people a chance to re-experience what happened that day. And it seems like a lot of your songs, your blogs, reflect what's happening in society and tell stories of things that have happened to people. And you teach as well, watercolors. I mean, what can't you do, Susie? That's what I was thinking as I was reading all of your stuff today. Like, gosh, this woman really got all the talent. I mean, what was left over for any of us? But you certainly do reflect what's happening in society, and your themes and messages are really embedded in your songs and your art. Is that something that you were setting out to do, or is that just something that drove you?
I was just, as the saying goes, born this way, and I grew up in a household. My parents were 2 generations older than I was, and my mother wrote poetry, and she slept with the English book, the Oxford Book of English Poetry, next to her bed. And my father was a lawyer, but he was a Shakespearean scholar, and he read Donald Francis Tovey's essays and musical analysis for fun. And he went to bought records. He was a really early audiophile, and he bought records from Sam Goody at his first store in New York City. Oh, and my dad was like super into history too. Oh, here's my first encounter with sci-fi was I'm about to have a little alien visitor here. Oh, maybe she won't come over. But anyway, my father took me when I was like 9 or 10 years old to see Forbidden Planet, the movie, and we were 2 of maybe 10 people in the theater, but he was so excited because there she is. This is oh God, Miss Tallulah, because Forbidden Planet is based on Shakespeare's Tempest, and he was explaining to me as the movie unfolded how it was based on the Tempest. But anyway, I grew up in that kind of household. So there was music and art, and I sang, before I could speak almost. And, I was writing poetry and painting and drawing, and it was just who I am. And, so I live like I have a trust fund and I'm 20 years old, and I don't, and I'm not.
Okay, I love that so much. That's amazing. I wish we didn't have to, we're muting ourselves because of an echo situation, but I've laughed so many times, and the cat meowing was fantastic.
That's a t-shirt.
Yeah, that should be a t-shirt. Yeah, I live like I'm 20 and have a trust fund. So wonderful. And that's actually quite opposite of your personality, just having delved into your knowledge of the world, your ability to think about what's going on. And something that we had wanted to talk about, interestingly, was how you've used music to sort of explore society's fears and hopes and collective consciousness. And as I was reading your blog today, you had written something talking about sort of this collective idea of UFOs, and what is it, and are we shifting our consciousness to believe in something different? What could it possibly be? And you said, but be prepared. Change, not to mention changing a personal paradigm, will make you extremely uncomfortable. It's worth it, though, whether you want to change the world or just your own reality. What's a little discomfort in the grand scheme of things? And that one paragraph resonated with me so much, because 3 years ago, I would have said I didn't believe in UFOs. I would have said I didn't care about them. I didn't think about them in any way, shape, or form. It wasn't until Tim approached me to do this podcast with him. I showed up as a skeptic. I started meeting wonderful, incredible people, intelligent people who all had this different, deep perspective of the universe and where we come from and where we're going and what these UFOs all mean. And I have been deeply uncomfortable for at least a year after every podcast episode, having to redesign and rewire my brain in terms of what I knew to be true and what might possibly exist out there and what might possibly be true. And I've lost so much sleep. We've had people on the podcast that have had, alien encounters and abductions and what have you. And my mind has really had to work through all of that. And it has been uncomfortable, but certainly I am having a shift in how I view the world. And with all of these congressional hearings, things that are happening, do you think that the whole world is having a shift to believe in something more, believe in something different?
Big question. And I think that going back to this Carl Jung, two things. Going back to this Carl Jung book on flying saucers, he talks about, because he's approaching it from, a collective unconscious or the collective psyche. And I haven't ever read the whole book, but he talks about the fact that we are collectively moving into, he calls it a Plutonic age, but it's basically a new astrological age. So right before Christianity came on the scene, we were moving from the age of, I forget, to the age of Pisces. And now we're moving from the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius, which doesn't happen, overnight. It takes a while. And so in that context, he talks about the collective consciousness shifting. And that's, so what are these experiences we're having? And, I have to tell you, in the Carl Jung 1958 article and in these 1955 books, they're all talking about not specifically congressional hearings, but, government or scientists saying there's no such thing, while a pilot flying a plane of passengers will share an experience of an encounter in the sky. So the other thing that I just heard this past week, and I'm just going to kind of throw this out there because, obviously there's something going on. I haven't had any direct experience. And, I think in the song, I kind of allude to, was it something from the future? Meaning, like, is there some kind of time wormhole or whatever involved in these encounters? But also, I've often thought that it's, I can't think of the word right now, but, there's so many dimensions that it's highly likely that you just are sort of perceiving something that's coming through from another reality. Isn't the right word, but I just can't think of the right term right now. Dimension, whatever. Dimension, probably. Yeah. And so anyway, there's a new book, I think it's been out about a year, or maybe it's just brand new this year, by a man named Ed Young, and it's called An Immense World. And the entire book is about all of the different species on the planet and how they all, not everyone, but how they perceive the world. So I can be sitting here on this couch and I will perceive the reality of my room in one way, and a fly could be buzzing around having a completely different experience, and then my cat also has an entirely different experience. And he's talking about from elephants to bees to small species of shrimp. And so I highly encourage you to, there's a podcast on, there's an interview with him on Point on WBUR that is amazing. And it's just really interesting because essentially he's just talking about being in the same place and having wildly different experiences. So I may have gotten off topic. I can't remember what your question was.
All good. No, I think that you're right about people having different experiences or animals having different experiences just based on perspective and exactly what they're going through at that moment. But speaking of experiences, you also have another song about Robert J. Oppenheimer. And I know Tim wanted to delve deep into that one with you as well. So, Tim, I'm going to toss it to you to move in that direction.
Thanks, CJ. I believe Suzanne was actually just describing the multiverse, and I don't know if that's the word you were looking for, but it sounded a lot like the multiverse. And one thing that's happened a lot on this show is we've discovered synchronicity. I didn't really know what the word meant before we started this podcast, but Suzanne, some topics that keep recurring on this show are Roswell, topics like mutually assured destruction and simultaneous atomic destruction, astrophysics. Just imagine, folks, if you're Suzanne McDermott, who's our special guest tonight, you've written a song about Roswell, and we're basically living in the year of the UFO. We've got UFO whistleblowers talking about Roswell. We've got congressional hearings with congressional leaders asking about Roswell, New Mexico. Not only that, but you've written and sung a song about one of the most mind-blowing pop culture events in recent memory, Barbieheimer. Am I saying that right, CJ? Barbieheimer? Barbieheimer?
Yeah, I'm unmuted now. Yeah, Barbieheimer. Well, you're getting to my song, The Three Dreams of J. Robert Oppenheimer. And I have to tell you, I was not permitted to have a Barbie growing up. I was forbidden to have a Barbie. And so it just occurred to me as I was reading the Vogue with Margot Kidder on or not Margot, you know who I mean, the star of Barbie. What is her name?
Margot Robbie.
Margot Robbie. And Oppenheimer, the Christopher Nolan movie, and Barbie. I thought, well, that explains it. I was not permitted to have a Barbie, so I wrote the song about Oppenheimer.
That's what I'm talking about. That is synchronicity right there. We didn't know about your history with Barbie, but who would have thought? Here comes Barbieheimer. But Suzanne, you have written a song about the three dreams of J. Robert Oppenheimer. And if it's okay with you, how about we just hear a little bit of it? It's a lengthy song, but we'll hear a little clip of it, and then we'll talk a little bit more about it. Here is The Three Dreams of J. Robert Oppenheimer. Of course, you can still go see the movie Oppenheimer in theaters right now. This is by our special guest, Suzanne McDermott.
Wise man following a star in a big gray Cadillac drove across the desert, traced his future in his track, on to California, to the scientific minds, to the duties of his nation and the fate of all mankind. I dreamed that I saw three men standing in front of me. One held a box of elements, one held a golden key, one held the holy sonnets, and from them he read to me. But I am betrothed unto your enemy. The Father moved through the Spirit into the Son. He revealed their secrets one by one. He warned that someday I would wish I never had begun.
And that's a little clip from The Three Dreams of J. Robert Oppenheimer. And right off the bat, Suzanne, I'd love to hear all about this, but I couldn't help but notice, whereas Roswell seemed kind of straightforward and very realistically descriptive, even though it's of a UFO event, Oppenheimer seemed to have a lot of symbolism, and it's hard not to notice the religious and other symbolism in your song, The Three Dreams of J. Robert Oppenheimer.
First of all, I got the idea for the song from watching a BBC 7-part series starring Sam Waterston as J. Robert Oppenheimer. So I wrote that song in 1982. There was nothing available about the Manhattan Project at that point, or Los Alamos. But anyway, I did find one book, I think it was called Brighter Than a Thousand Suns. Anyway, I learned that Oppenheimer, amongst other things, was reading the Holy Sonnets by John Donne. And so, I don't know, my little poetic puzzle mind kind of put this idea together. And again, it was a framework for the song. So I took the idea of Trinity and the Holy Sonnets, and they all kind of worked together to frame the song in 3 parts with a lot of poetic license and quoting Donne in it. And because of that song, I went and I performed. I was living in Santa Monica at that time, and I performed all around Los Angeles for anti-nuclear rallies, and I opened for Gore Vidal when he was running for state senate, and it was really interesting. And also at that time, I was able to, there were still a few living atomic vets. This is one of the most memorable things, and they were just basically crumbling from the inside. And so I was able to sit in a small room and meet with with an atomic vet and hear him give a talk.
Well, I feel like it would, if you were involved in that era. My dad was in World War II in the Army, served under Patton. And I feel like if you were involved in that era, it was hard not to become philosophical or religious or spiritual or mystical. When they first did that, at the very first detonation, the test detonation, they honestly didn't know if they were about to destroy the entire world. Very difficult times, a very serious song, lots of symbolism. I just think it's an amazing song. Suzanne, you seem really inspired by historical events and historical figures. Can you tell us more about how historical events and figures have sort of inspired your creativity?
Well, my own little private joke is actually on my website, on my About page. And when I don't even know if I was walking yet, but my parents brought me, or my father brought me, to have my first formal baby picture taken. And I'm sure Mr. Okada, who was the photographer, said, well, why don't you give her something to hold, like a ball or something? And there's a picture of me holding Arnold J. Toynbee's Greek Civilization and Character in my little smock dress. So I just thought that was the funniest thing in the world. But it's definitely not anything that I intentionally went after. And yet, there's the Oppenheimer song, there's the Roswell song. When I started, it's a long story, but when I started trying to kind of refit my touring so that I could, earn some kind of a living, I started giving programs, and all of them were historically based. So, on American folk songs. And then I recorded a Christmas album, which was essentially like the history of the Christmas Carol. So I toured with programs on the history and development of the Christmas Carol. And then when I just had to get off the road, and I started teaching drawing and watercolor, and then I, really threw myself into drawing and painting. My courses, I teach drawing and watercolor largely now through learning about and copying historic paintings. So I'm just really into it, and it's, what a better way to learn about the human situation, so.
I really can't agree more. I was thinking as you were saying this about the songs and about the paintings and using historical concepts to create those. how much more our children would learn in school if they were using art to learn history, if they were writing songs. I mean, look at how successful Hamilton is, right? So Hamilton shook everybody's brains. Everybody loved Hamilton because here you're getting this story of history presented through a really creative form of art that high school students loved, something that they would not have been interested in before. And so when you can take something like a historical event or a historical figure and put it into a song or into a painting or what have you, I do think it resonates with people. I think it sticks with people more. We need to incorporate so much more of that into our education because so many people do have artistic brains. Me, not so much. I try, maybe writing, but I really struggle with art. Though my kids have it, and my grandfather was a fabulous artist. So maybe I'll have to take one of your classes and see what I can do with some watercolors.
In my lifetime, I've watched the arts. Well, in some ways, they've been promoted. And this is a whole other conversation that I actually don't want to get into. But, when my mother was growing up, they had to memorize Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. I mean, as little kids, and so it was, this is, the arts are a way to learn. And also in terms of denigrating yourself, in terms of not being artistic or stuff, if there was a time in my life when I was a zealot for people drawing, not learning to draw, but just to draw, like everybody, anybody. And, it's much more popular or accepted in England and Europe, but not in the United States. And I cannot tell you how many adults told me that, their 5-year-old could draw better than they could. They couldn't draw a straight line. They didn't have an artistic bone in their body. And I'm like, if you had to find a toilet in the middle of the Sahara, you betcha you could draw something to communicate to somebody who you spoke a different language from. And, there's all this baggage around people being able to express themselves, and a lot of it has to do with the materialistic culture that we live in that I could just keep talking about, but I won't right now.
That's right. And a lot of people believe that Close Encounters of the Third Kind was really onto something when basically we were communicating with extraterrestrials via music and art, and a lot of people think that if we ever do communicate with extraterrestrials, it's going to be through things like mathematics as well, which, by the way, is closely tied to art and music. And so, by the way, CJ mentioned Hamilton, and I know all about Hamilton from the Hamilton Polka by Weird Al. So shout out to Weird Al. Taught me all there is to know about Hamilton.
But see, again, art, right?
Through a good polka.
That's so funny. And Suzanne, you're so right about the competitive nature of our culture and thinking we're not good at something and not wanting to fail in the eyes of others and what have you. And it is absolutely a mental block. And I just need to open my mind to the experience and sit down and do it.
Suzanne, sorry. I want to hit on something you talked about, the Christmas Carol education that you do. And I hate to put you on the spot, but is there anything you can tell us about the history of Silent Night?
It's a German carol, Stille Nacht, and no, that wasn't. I'm talking like way back to 11th century, 12th century, but I know it's a German carol, and I know there was a movie, wasn't there, about a day of amnesty for Christmas, and I don't know, but no, I don't, and that wasn't part of my repertoire. But I did want to say something about music, and that when you said Close Encounters, I completely forgot about that. And that sequence, it came from a composer, not Karl Orff, not Kadai. Might have been Zoltan Kadai. But anyway, what I wanted to say is that even Mahler Gustav Mahler talked about the music of the spheres. And there are like prints or drawings or lithographs of describing celestial music. And just the other day, I saw an article about, of course, everything is newly discovered, but an article about some scientific paper on basically celestial sounds, celestial music coming from outside the galaxy, outside our galaxy. I think I would have to look it up, but you could Google it easily and find that. Yeah, and another thing, another thing about our culture is that it's so damn noisy. It is so noisy. You cannot hear anything. I mean, it drives me crazy. And but you can't hear the birds, the bees, for the leaf blowers and whatever. But there's so much music. Even just trying to record sounds of nature. There's always these days going to be a plane or something in the background. But music is all around us.
Getting my blood pressure up talking about this noise pollution.
Yeah, don't get Tim worked up about noise pollution. Tim, I saw a meme the other day and it made me think of you. And it was somebody saying like, oh, we moved out of the city because we just couldn't stand all of that noise. And on either side of them is like people with leaf blowers, blowing all of the leaves out. And I'm like, oh, it's so Tim. I think one of the first things you ever said to me when we were talking on the phone one time was like, the leaf blowers, the noise pollution in my backyard.
They start up at like 7:30 a.m. and they just keep going.
Two things make me want to commit murder. I realize I'm saying this in public, but leaf blowers and wave runners. Those two things.
Nothing will ruin a relaxing day at the lake like a wave runner off in the distance making constant noise. I agree.
I tell you, Suzanne, one thing that a lot of folks often wonder about when we talk to an artist or a musician is, can you tell us a little bit more about your creative process from idea conception to the final product? I think that's something that non-artists, non-musicians, that they just don't really have a concept there of what's happening from start to finish.
From start, I don't know, but when faced with this sort of question, I think about Kandinsky's, he's got an article that he wrote on the question of form. He talks about the white fertilizing ray. And I'm not sure if in that context he was talking about this, but it's, you were talking about synchronicity. So I think the creative process has a lot to do with a number of different things. One is preparation. What do they say about opportunity is something about preparation. I can't remember the quote. So, it's good to hone to get your muscles exercised and prepped for a run, if you're going to do a run. So it's good to practice whatever art or craft you're working in. If you're a guitarist, you have to practice. If you're a pianist, if you're a writer, you have to write, and there's that. But also it's like, you get an idea, like with the Oppenheimer song, like, I don't know where did I get an idea to write a song about that? But it kind of catches you, it's like, oh, there's an idea. And somebody once called me an idea factory. So, you can't follow everyone, but if it sticks, then, okay, perfect example. Like, with the Roswell song, that I turned around, walked into a bookstore and picked up an old book about, flying saucers, or, and it's not like anything I do intentionally or one would do intentionally. I mean, you can sit down, meet with a writing partner, knock out a song, and so forth. That's not what I do, but this is reminding me of something, and I can't quite think of what it is, but you sort of, in terms of synchronicity or coincidence or serendipity or whatever, this is how I live my life. I'll get an idea and then I turn around and there's something else related to it, or I go down a rabbit hole and something else is, feeds into the idea. And it's true of like putting together my courses or preparing my classes or, choosing a painting. And in a way, it's kind of anxiety producing because I want to know everything up front. I'm a Virgo, and I do have anxiety, and I would like to know everything up front, and it just doesn't work that way. So eventually, part of the practicing the craft or something is that you have enough skill to honing the package. And I don't know if any of that makes sense because it's a very kind of abstract experience. And, Twyla Tharp, the dancer, has a really good book called The Creative Something. And she talks about using a box. Like she'll have a new project coming up, and she'll put all these ideas into this box, or all sorts of preparation for the project into the box. But I will say, just end this ramble with one thing, and that is that I am performance and project oriented. I'm not writing songs now because I'm not performing or recording. And so I won't just write a song to just stick in a drawer. And also there are only so many hours in a day. So, I'm really focused on what's the life, what's going to give this life to this, or how can I share this, whatever it is, a song or painting or course or whatever.
Well, you certainly do fill every hour of the day, it seems. I mean, to spend some time on your blog, you realize that you meditate and you do yoga and you teach classes and you have music, and you are so deeply connected to everything you've ever created. It feels like every song that you create forms all of these new connections to new people who take you to new places with it. And even with the Oppenheimer song, I was reading where you ended up meeting some of the physicists who had worked on the Manhattan Project, including Francis Lowe, who ended up playing the piano with you on this song. And I can see you have more.
I do want to talk about Francis and Tony. When I wrote the Oppenheimer song, well, time passed, like a decade passed. I went many different places, and I wound up at MIT, and I was working with the chairs, a couple chairs of the faculty, and the president at that time, and faculty policy committees, and just faculty committees. But anyway, I just happened to connect with two retired theoretical physicists, and we just really hit it off. And I was just reading about Tony French, who was Edward Teller's assistant at Los Alamos. I mean, he wasn't the only one, but he was, in his team of assistants when he was 23 or 24 years old. And so that was a bit of serendipity that was completely unexpected. And I loved both of those men dearly. But anyway, yeah, that life is full of surprises.
It sure seems that way, but it also feels like you have curated a life to be full of surprises. So that's a beautiful thing. And everybody should certainly get over to Suzanne's website. It is worth a day spent diving into all of your wonderful creativity and past stories, and that is SuzanneMcDermott.com, I believe. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, yes, SuzanneMcDermott.com. You were mentioning the book by Twyla Tharp, and that is The Creative Habit. Learn it and use it for life is what that one is called. Before we send you off for the day, for those that are listening to the show, we always like to ask our guests if they have any advice for people that might not be totally open-minded yet, might not be believers in all the other things going on. And clearly none of us are sitting here saying that we have the answers to what we are seeing, but what would be your advice for anybody who might be a little closed-minded at this moment?
Oh, there's more to heaven and earth than something, Horatio. Yeah, I mean, we live in, okay, I've got it for you. We live in an extremely materialistic world. It's just, I think about probably as materialistic as it's ever been. I don't know. I've only been around for my lifetime. But, thinking scientifically or about physics, everything is in motion. And we don't perceive it that way. But, every piece of material is just energy in some form or another. And so, and really think, if you were brought up in a religion or you have any spiritual beliefs, really think about what those beliefs are. I mean, I was raised Catholic from a long line of Irish Catholics and priests, and I bad rap these days, I understand, but I have a great deal of respect for all of that. And when you look into, for any of the religious tradition belief systems, it's kind of unusual. It's sticking with Catholicism, transubstantiation, and Our Lady of Lourdes, or Our Lady of Fatima, or the Burning Bush. That's more Judeo-Christian. But right now, it's kind of all about the bottom line, and there's just so much more to life than that. And I guess that's what I have to say.
I love it. So much more to life than the bottom line. There you go. Another t-shirt, Tim. Get these up on the website soon.
Noted.
So we have been talking with Suzanne McDermott. We are so lucky to have you on our show this evening. I do believe that you have just a deep understanding of life and what there is to offer, and you're constantly looking for more meaning in it. And we have worked through our technical difficulties. I'm so proud of us for that. Suzanne, we're going to ask that you do hang out with us in the studio after we sign out to make sure that everything gets uploaded properly. Tim, is there anything that you wanted to add before we sign out?
Check out SuzanneMcDermott.com. Amazing stuff over there. Songs, art, classes that you can take, you name it, all kinds of great things. Folks, don't forget, the skies are not classified yet. The woods mostly are not classified. Get off your screens. Go outside. Take a hike. Watch the skies at night. You never know what you might see.
Absolutely. I told Tim before we started the show, I sent him a message. I said, I think Suzanne's going to be one of my favorite people after today. And that is just from not even speaking to you, but reading
She
all
really
that you
did
have
say that.
done. Yeah, that's not a lie. I just loved it. So everybody do yourselves a favor and go take a look at her website. Thank you so much for joining us, Suzanne. We hope that we can have you on our show again. For everybody that is listening, we hope that you stay happy, stay strange, and listen to all things unexplained.
Thanks. Like, share, follow, comment, subscribe, support. What's your hot take on Travis Taylor?
I've got an exclusive for you guys if you want it about the Alaska.
We do.
Okay.
More at BigfootUFO.com.
All things unexplained.
So some of that, I think, sir, will save for closed session.